At this time in the meeting, we normally hear from our sponsors, and our sponsor today is not able to be with us, but I will give her a little commercial for her. Her name is Elba Rushing with Rushing Accurate Bookkeeping, and Elba was our featured speaker last month in August. I describe Elba as a very calming money expert. After more than 18 years in education, she followed the dream of working from home and opened a bookkeeping and budgeting business. She takes the stress out of managing monthly money, and instead of feeling controlled by budgeting, she helps you shift that idea so that you can choose to control your money to reach the goals you have set. She likes to focus on your relationship with money, and kind of determine where things are coming from so you are able to shift there. If you have any interest in seeing her presentation, it is on my YouTube channel. Lana Paul is my YouTube channel. If any of you are interested in sponsoring a meeting, please let me know, and I will give you those details. So now it is time for me to introduce our inspiring speaker for this morning, and that is Tom Rasmussen. And he has become a really good friend of mine, and I feel privileged to be able to introduce him today. He has much more to talk about, I'm sure, than friendship, but I wouldn't be surprised if relationships aren't a part of his discussion. But I don't know, I haven't heard it yet. For more than 30 years, Tom has been advising individuals and families on the importance of funding strategies and has built his career through education on many subject matters. Tom has been interviewed on many radio shows addressing senior issues and small business protection strategies. 5 years ago, he moved to Colorado Springs with his wife, Pam, and immediately made a name for himself by continuing his education efforts and offering workshops and education seminars all over Colorado. He is a continuous instructor for the nonprofit Pillar Lifelong Learning and currently sits on their marketing committee. Along with writing articles for trade magazines and newspapers, he also contributed to Kevin Gutman's Amazon's bestseller, Retire with Freedom and Confidence. He published his own book, Are You Protecting Your Greatest Asset, in December of 2018, and it has received glowing reviews. He is currently collaborating with another colleague on a book titled Ignorance is Not Always Bliss, and another solo project titled Life Lessons for Any Age, and hopes to have them out in 2021. Tom, please take it away. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes.
Let's see if we can get the screen sharing to work here.
Yes.
All right. There we go.
All right.
So, lessons for any age. Now, the people that are on this call, I just wondered what.
Oh, Tom, wait, I muted you.
You broke up.
It's me. I did it
Oh,
too.
there we go.
So we there now?
Sorry, Tom.
So I'm already cut off?
Yeah, so you have to start over. Very sorry.
Oh man, I was on a roll too.
Very, very sorry.
Anyway, thank you for showing up today. Lessons for any age. You know, this is basically put together for Inspiring Wellness and myself. You know, it's a kind of a broad subject. Would you not agree? That lessons for any age, what does that mean? So people have been asking, what is the meaning of life since they were conscious of such thought? The ability to ask why. I mean, that's what separates us from all other living things, is we have the ability to say, why is this the way it is? But ultimately, your answers to life's greatest questions will come down to how you deal with your own life's lessons. So this is a quote from Helen Keller. Life is a succession of lessons that must be lived to be understood. Now, obviously, if I'm in a live classroom or a live workshop, I get to see people shaking their heads or not. And since I don't get that opportunity, I'm hoping that you possibly agree with that saying. So let's start with the things that we know are life certainties. What are life certainties? Well, you can see here that Mark Twain stated this, and you probably all might have responded the same way. Does everybody agree that life certainties are death and taxes? Well, you're only
You
half
already know the answer on this one.
You're only half right, because believe it or not, even Mark Twain is wrong. Because if we look at human existence from the beginning of time, taxes were never a life certainty, but death definitely was, and also aging. So life's true certainties are death and aging, not necessarily taxes, even though that's become a certainty of life. We probably would prefer not to have that a certainty of life, but it is what it is, right? So if we understand, I mean, does anybody disagree that with death and aging to be life certainties? Speak up or forever hold your peace. So I guess everybody's on board with that. So if death and aging are life certainties, when do we start aging? Could you say we start aging at birth?
Yes.
So if we start aging from birth, as much as this sounds like a downer, could you also say that we also start dying from birth? Not from birth, but from birth on, because we don't know how much time we have. So we never know if we're going to live to 100 or something in between. But we know that life certainties of aging and death are things that we can definitely hang our hat on. So what happens between birth and death?
A whole lot of life.
Yeah, well, it's the uncertainties of life. This is where life lessons play a role. I mean, the time in between birth and death, or when we encounter the uncertainties of life. So again, if we are encountering uncertainties of life, could we actually relabel those as life lessons? When we experience life lessons, what do we refer that to as? It's life experienced. Some people might say, well, isn't it wisdom? When does life experience become wisdom? Well, actually, if you really break it down, life experiences only become wisdom when learned and applied. And the last part of that is significant with wisdom, because if we can learn a lesson, that's an intellectual aspect of it, but if we don't do the learning, if we don't apply the learning, then did we really gain any wisdom? You know, time and time again, people repeat the same lessons over and over again. I know that I've said it myself, possibly a lot of you have said, why does this keep on happening? Well, did we apply the lesson learned, or did we not even learn that lesson? Life has a funny way of continuing to put us in a position to learn a lesson, and if we don't learn it, we will repeat it over and over again. So, when does wisdom begin? Are we born with wisdom? Wisdom is the birth of experience. That's why young people think they know it all. And a lot of times as they go through life and get to be adults, they realize that maybe they don't, because they simply haven't had life experiences to provide the learning aspect to become wise. That only comes through time. It only comes through experience. So it's really comes down to, are we living life consciously or unconsciously? This is really important. If you can see the quote up here, the present moment is the only moment available to us, and it is the door that opens all moments. Too many times we go through life on autopilot. It's a subconscious that reacts to everyday experiences that's built on past experiences that we allow to control our moving forward. We don't a lot of times consciously think about why we're reacting. Are we reacting to an experience because of an experience that happened years ago, and the emotional synapses in our brains connect to that experience, so we immediately react to it the way we did years ago because we keep on reliving that experience over and over again because we wanted something different? Do we move forward? Do we learn? Do we gain wisdom from that type of subconscious reaction? Well, the answer is no. We get stuck. We stay where we're at. So from this point on, if we live life consciously and we recognize that when we're unconsciously, we have to bring ourselves to the moment to experience that moment to move forward, then what is the constant of life that we're constantly going to be dealing with that we have to address? That word is change.
Mortality and change.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm right there.
I mean, change is the constant of life, and yet as humans, we resist it. Why do we resist change? Because it takes us out of our comfort zone. And our comfort zone is built around, again, unconscious response. Because familiarity is where we want to live. And so if we can't deal with the constant change of life, then how are we going to move forward? If we are accepting of change, it is the foundation of resiliency. Now, I do a lot of workshops and I ask this question: how many people feel that they're resilient? And I get kind of half the group raising their hand and half not sure. Well, I think we all know that if we've had a challenging situation in our lives and we made it through the other side of that challenging situation, then we were resilient. Now, there's another word that I use quite a bit. In fact, it's part of my book that I wrote, is empowerment. Is empowerment and resiliency the same thing? They're not. Empowerment is gaining through the other side of resiliency. Resiliency can lead to empowerment, but they're two different things because it goes back to life lessons. We can push through a situation, a challenging situation, and we can, what I call intestinal fortitude, to get to that other side. But I think that any of us that experienced that type of push through to resiliency is absolutely energy draining. We're spent. We might need to take a day off or two from that experience because, well, basically because we weren't prepared for it. Or we are in a suffering situation. Now, I never quite understood suffering until I did some studying and some research in regards to suffering, and I try to break everything down to simplicity. And suffering, quite frankly, in its simplest form, is nothing more than wanting a different outcome and not accepting the reality that is presented. And as long as we resist that outcome because we want a different one, we will continue to suffer. So does that, if we're in suffering mode, we're not really being resilient and we're not being empowered and we don't move through the situation. So keep that in mind next time you feel like you're suffering, and ask yourself, why am I struggling with this so much? Why is this just so hard to get over? And it might be because you want a different outcome, and by God, you're going to stay in this sad place until you get it, which what's the likelihood of that coming around? Probably not, right? So it's accepting of the moment, as we just read, the phrase. And once we accept the moment, we gain resiliency. We can empower ourselves to move through it. And through that experience, hopefully by doing and learning through that experience, we gain wisdom to overcome the next time we're challenged in those situations. Now, again, I'd ask you all, do y'all agree? Raise your hand, but hopefully this is resonating with you. So is there a better way to gain wisdom without the energy drain? Well, there is, if one wants to take the effort, make the effort, I should say, to reach out to people that we feel have the answers that maybe we need to get to a better point in our lives. I think they're known as mentors. So we can either live through that experience and do the intestinal push through and be energy drained, but still hopefully learn from that lesson, or we can prepare ourselves prior to that experience possibly showing up in our lives by gaining the wisdom through others that have already walked that path. So with that said, I have to go back to why I'm talking on this subject, because I hold no degree in this subject. I've got to be honest with you. I don't have, other than my own research and education that I've put, in front of myself to learn, I can't share anything with you today than what my own 64 years of being alive has taught me. And believe me, I'm still learning. This is always a work in progress. It's nothing that you can say, okay, I'm good, because if we understand anything about life lessons, it's that when you get the one you're working on, without a doubt, there will be another one right around the corner to learn again. Now, that's not a bad thing, because that's the only way we can evolve. It's the only way we can evolve as individuals. It's the only way we can evolve as a species, as a society. We can't evolve if we're not challenged and learn moving forward, because again, change is the constant of life. So if you don't mind, I'd like to share some of there's a lot of life key lessons that I can share with you, but because of the lack of time, I want to share 6 of them with you that I think are very important, and you guys can either take them as being, yeah, that makes sense, or pass them off and feel that you've already got them covered. So let's talk about just a few life lessons. The first one to me is the most important one. Define your beliefs. Now, why is that so important? Well, I'm only going to speak from my own personal situation. But it wasn't until I was about 50 years old where I actually took this to heart, because somebody had brought this question to myself: what do I truly believe? And the key word is there, what do I truly believe? Not what people have tried to instill upon me from the day I was born, because that's their beliefs. And sometimes this is the hardest road, this hardest journey, is to strip down what is truly your beliefs versus what's been instilled upon you by other people. But once you go through that process and you can determine what you truly believe versus what people tell you to believe, you will truly start finding your own way. And if you can get to that way, then all other life lessons can be defined by your true belief core as opposed to what other people have told you how you should believe. So this is number one life lesson that I would tell to anybody, that if you truly don't know your own inner core beliefs, you better do some soul searching. You better take some time to really analyze it. Because once you do that, you'll find that a lot of stuff that you thought you were beliefs were not your beliefs. Whoops, how did we get there? That jumped ahead. Well, that's weird. I just lost. There, let's go. One of my slides just got moved around. We got gremlins in the system. So if we define our beliefs, then the next life lesson is, what is your relationship with money? Money is something that everybody either struggles with or is challenged with or has great success with. Money is not everything, but I will tell you that if you don't know your own emotional relationship with money, you will struggle until you determine what truly that is, because it goes back to the beliefs situation again. A lot of times we will find that our belief about money, our relationship with money, is based on what we grew up with, the way our parents treated money, the way we were told to treat money, and they kind of seep into our thought process. And again, if we're not conscious and we go along unconscious as far as past experiences, then we will continue to treat money the way we are emotionally related to that, even not knowing truly what that is. I'm going to give a plug to Lana right here, because if this is something that you feel might be an issue, that you would like to understand what your true emotional relationship with money, there's not a better person that you can go to than Lana, and she can help work through those past beliefs, the people in your life, what was their relationship with money, and help you maybe have a more healthier view of money. Because I'll tell you right now, in my life, money is not the cure-all. It doesn't bring happiness, but it sure helps life to be a little bit more comfortable. And I found in my life that when I don't stress about money, somehow it comes to me easier than when I stress about it. Because I realize the emotional aspect, if I'm stressing about money, that means I'm thinking in a sense of lack and scarcity. And when my mindset is in a lacking or scarcity position, then it does not free up the ability for money to flow to me easier, because I think that's all there is. There's not any abundance, it's a limited amount, and I got to hang on to what I've got. And so therefore it basically influences all my decisions going forward. And I find that I don't make good decisions because I'm so, in the past, I should say, I've learned this over the time, but I've learned the more I think about scarcity of money, the less money comes to me. So think about that. Lesson 2 is, what is your relationship with money? Third lesson, don't leave a mess. Now I say this because we have a tendency as human beings to fill voids. As we move into maybe larger spaces in our home, in our new homes or what have you, we tend to have this thought that we've got to fill it up with stuff. And I've learned over my time that a very important lesson for me is I went through a divorce where, and at the same time, the recession, a bankruptcy, and also losing my home, which most people would say, oh my God, that was the worst thing could ever happen to you. I will tell you right now, it was the most empowering experience of my life. Because what it got me to realize is my true value is me and not what I own or who I'm with. And when I regained that, I realized that because I don't have stuff, I can go make anything I want out of my life going forward. Stuff is easy to replace. It's the ability to understand your own value and move forward and realize your own greatness moving forward of what achieves your success or what you determine to be your success as you go further into life. So when I say don't leave a mess, decluttering is the most freeing thing you can ever do. If you haven't done it, I suggest try it. Because the more stuff you get rid of, the more freer you become. Because the reality is, we don't own our things own us. And the bigger things we own, the more we've got to maintain them. And it stifles our freedom. Now, I'm not saying get rid of everything and go be a monk and go live in a cave someplace. But define what's important and what's not so important. Now, to give you a relationship to what I feel is important is I am what is termed as a vinyl junkie. I love music. I have a very large album collection. It's my pride and joy. And some people might think, why do you have all those albums? You know, why do you not clean that mess up? Because it's very important to me. So the things that you cherish in your life that bring you joy, then obviously it's important to be able to maintain those, but not everything fits that particular situation. Now, the reason this is also important is because too many times in my business, I see the end result of people that leave messes. If you have loved ones, and at some point in time, as we've talked about the certainties of life, you are going to pass away. And by passing away, if you leave a mess for your loved ones to clean up, you are doing a disservice to your own memory because you have left them the burden of cleaning up your mess, and they cannot completely, fully embrace the loss of your passing because they are stressed out to do with what to do with all of your stuff. So think about that. And a lot of times, oh, my kids will want this, my friend will want that. But that's an assumption. Ask them. If they want it, give it to them now. Let them have the pleasure of you giving that gift to them as you're alive, as opposed to after the fact, and then find out that no, it gets tossed in the garbage because they really didn't want it in the first place. So don't leave a mess, and that means physically, and it also means emotionally. Clean up your relationships with people. Don't hold regrets. You don't want to go to your grave with regrets, wishing that you would have taken care of situations with loved ones, friends, what have you, because something that was said a long time ago that should have been overcome. So when I say don't leave a mess, that means physically, it also means emotionally. This is a big one. Tell your story. I was involved with the impact of this when my parents died. My mother was heavily into genealogy, had many records about past ancestors, and she had boxes and boxes of pictures, of photos, of people that she did not write on the back of who they were, and I have no idea who they are. We can only pass on to generations behind us our story if we somehow capture it, either by written form, video, whatever you feel, short little, storyline, what have you. But keep in mind that sometimes even with our own children, we think, well, they know us because we raised them. Well, they didn't know you before they were born. Maybe you have a story to pass on to them to let them know that you were an actual regular human being that had a life before they were born and before they or you were their parent. It might be important to pass it along. And it also is important to pass it on to your grandchildren and maybe your great-grandchildren, but it's never going to be passed along unless you capture the story. And now's the best time to start doing it, because when you try to do, well, I'll write it next month, I'll write it 10 years from now, how much are you going to lose by not remembering the important details you want to pass along to your loved ones? So that's lesson 4. Lesson 5, you got to do the paperwork. What does that mean? Well, Kim, I think you probably know what that means. You got to have the documents in place with the wills, the trusts, the power of attorneys, the things, again, that your loved ones are going to need when you either become incapacitated or you pass on. Even to spouses. I can tell you that I've had so many times where a husband will pass away and told his wife nothing about their financial situation, who their insurance agent was, what have you. And they are lost in this dark, closet of not knowing because they never shared that information. And this is really important in today's world when you want to have a advanced directive of how you want to go out in this life. And again, we're aging every day. We don't know when that end result's going to be. This is not something that I'll put off until I'm 80 years old. Start thinking about that now, because we are too dependent on our medical community to make those decisions for us. And their whole reason for being and what they're doing in the medical community is not to give you a good life lived, but to try to keep you alive at all costs, not looking at what that life could look like. My father, when he passed away, he was ready to go. Now, our children, again, unless you leave the instructions, you cannot depend on them to make your choices, because you're their parent. I had to come to grips when my father passed away, and I had to honor his wishes because he'd lived a good life. He outlived all of his brothers and sisters, all of his friends, finally his wife of 67 years. And he said, I've had enough. And I watched him just go like this when he says, I'm done. And as much as I wanted him around for another minute, week, hour, I had to honor that wish. Because if we don't honor those wishes, the cycle of life does not continue, because we're not meant to live forever. It goes back to the storytelling. That's why we pass on our stories, so we can let our children live through what our experiences have been, our life lessons, and hopefully they'll not have to have those hardships themselves, and they'll learn from our challenges and have a better life for it, because they're going to have plenty of challenges on their own anyway. The 6th lesson is have a plan. You got to have a plan. In 36 years of doing what I do, I've found that people will take 3 approaches to life's biggest decisions. The first one is they tell themselves an elaborate story. It's a beautiful script, could be a Hollywood movie, but how many times has our stories that we've told ourselves play out? And the reason it generally does not play out is because a little thing called life happens events get in the way of that. Because we don't have a crystal ball. So we can lay out a story how it's all going to play, but very, very rarely does that ever happen. The second thing people do is make excuses. Now, excuses are a lesser form of storytelling because at least a story is built on some basis of fact. Excuses, pardon me, is just laziness. Because to be empowered, you have to have a why and a passion of where you're trying to get to. You have to do the research and you have to take action. An excuse is just a delay tactic because you don't want to deal with it. And the third is you have a plan. A plan beats a story and excuse every single time. You can't deny that. So do you want to put in the effort? That's up to you. But a plan will prepare you, as I stated earlier. You can have the intestinal fortitude to push through a life lesson challenging situation, and hopefully you'll have gained the resiliency and the empowerment at the other end, or you can have a plan to make that less energy draining. Does a plan take away from future situations? Yeah, that goes back to the money. Live for today, forget about tomorrow, or maybe we balance that and put some money aside. Maybe we get a little protection plan in there in case life events come our way that put us in a situation that we can handle it better. Because here's the reality, and I'm always called the buzzkill in my workshops, because we can talk emotionally about aging. We can talk about the things that basically will erode retirement faster than anything, which is health costs and long-term care costs. But the thing is, every aspect of life, even legal, has a cost to it. You have to have funding to do these things. And one of the things that is a statement I hear all the time is, I've got enough money to overcome this, or I'm going to self-insure. I want to be clear here. This is not an insurance message. I just want to, words are very powerful things. There is no such thing as self-insuring. It's only self-funding. So we got to the end of our time, and I want to leave you with this, this little piece I want to read to you. There is no doubt that it takes effort to learn the lessons of life, but with effort, there is empowerment. Putting energy into empowering learning before the time of need is far less energy draining. To be empowered by learning is how we become resilient. To be empowered by doing allows us no limits of what we can achieve. So with that, I appreciate the opportunity. I hope something resonated with you. You can take it away from this session that we've had today. And I'm leaving it open for any questions, thoughts, or suggestions. If you guys want to chime in and tell me that I'm full of whatever, or give me some of your own suggestions.
Tom, I love that last statement. No self-insurance, it's self-funding. I think that's really powerful right there.
Anybody else? Thank you, Jasper.
Sorry. I'm like,
That one was powerful. I had something else. Let me see if I can find it. I starred a lot of things. I took good notes. I think you're talking about the suffering. That's an amazing message to be putting out in the world. I don't think people realize what it means to be in suffering, like what it really means. And I even declared that this weekend. I'm done with suffering. To Victoria, she'll tell you.
Well, and I want to state something. Everybody has the right to suffer. You know, that's not a good or bad situation or whatever. You have every right to suffer for as long as you want, but please understand the suffering only is overcome by accepting the reality and moving through it. But one can suffer for as long as they want. That's their choice.
I just wanted to say really quick, going in relation to that, that was such a powerful piece for me also, especially the way you related it to resiliency and empowerment. You know, we hear so often, you need to be resilient, you need to be more resilient and build your resilience. I never understood what they meant. Like, I knew I needed to do that, but what do you mean? So I really appreciate that explanation. It was really beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, if we don't have any other questions, again, I appreciate the opportunity to share my life lessons. I'm sure you have your own, and you could probably do the same thing I did as far as just expressing what you've learned through your years in this world, and hope that you continue to learn, and hopefully you've used those opportunities to gain the wisdom to overcome the challenges that will continue to come our way and till we pass on. So thank you for all of you to share this with me today, and me sharing with you, and I just want to say thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Yeah, it was really good, Tom. Two more things that I had. One is about once you do learn whatever lesson it is you're learning, yeah, be assured there's the next lesson, but that's a good thing. I mean, maybe sometimes it's tiring, but it is a good thing. And the other one was about telling your story. And again, I was with Victoria, and I met a photographer several years ago, like 4 or 5 years ago, and she was talking about women and how they don't tell their stories, and how they not only do they not tell their stories, but they don't capture themselves even in photographs. And so they're just going to disappear because there's no record of them really. Yeah. And so I ended up having a photography session with her, and at least I have those. Maybe I'll be in no other photos, but at least I'll have those to show my grandkids and great grandkids.
Well, you know, that's an interesting situation, especially, and don't slap me, all you fine ladies out there.
Yeah, right?
But, you know, I'm married, and I'm going to be honest. We know that society puts more of an emphasis on you looking a certain way than it does on men. But if I can share anything from a male point of view of the beauty that I have in my life, is your inner beauty shines way more stronger than your outer beauty. And telling your story is part of that, because it's not what you think of yourself, it's what your loved ones think of you and know you to be. And they see your beauty beyond, a lot of times you can even see yourself. So don't use that as an excuse not to capture a story or capture your image. Because again, like Lana says, if you don't, then you're gone. You're gone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's not a pleasant thought. Thank you again, Tom, and thank you everybody for being here today. It really means a lot to me for us to be able to come together and have these discussions and to have amazing speakers. And you were very inspiring today, Tom, and I appreciate you sharing your 6 life lessons with us.
I appreciate it a lot too. Thank you.
Yes. If any of you would like to have an opportunity to speak, please reach out to me. Or if you know of someone else in your life or in business that you know would have a great story or could add value and inspiration to our meetings, let me know that as well. And I can get them the application. Next month, we'll be meeting on the 2nd Tuesday of the month, as always, at 10 a.m. And I will be speaking at that time. And I'll be talking a lot about grief and loss and what we can do to take steps to let go of some of it so that we aren't suffering as much. And with this coming up on October, we're approaching the holidays, and it's always a difficult time of year for people for many reasons. Some of our loved ones are no longer with us, or it's just a time where we really take a look at our lives, and a lot of times there is a lot of suffering during the holiday time. So I hope that when you leave that meeting, that you'll have some tools to take with you to help you in that day, and also maybe even have some tips for you to implement in your life if you have children in your lives, or you could pass along to other adults that do have children in their lives. So I hope you can join us then. And I think that is all that I have. I encourage you all to work on your connections. How about that for this month? Everybody choose one relationship and try to enrich that relationship just a little bit. Thank you all.